Species.
Welcome to Origin of Species. I'm Steve here with my good friend Scott. Watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating and a positive review. And if you really enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon. Become a Species supporter at patreon.com/species. As a Species supporter, you get great benefits, including special exclusive podcasts like 3 Silly Questions, where we ask our special guests 3 silly questions. Very well titled show. Tonight's special guest is an awesome TikTok comedian who also holds the Guinness World Record for the world's largest mouth, Sam Ramsdell. Fittingly, our subject today is the origin of the expression big mouth.
Nice. And she
So
does have a big mouth. And
she,
in
yeah,
a good way, right? We could
in
say.
a good way, in a world record way. Just like Billy Mitchell's the King of Kong, and I also hold a Guinness Book World Record. Maybe we'll talk about that with Sam when she's on with us later. So this was a term that I thought would be a good fit for our guest, but I wasn't sure how the origin would look. So when I explored how this term came to be, I was very surprised in a good way about the story behind it. So the origin includes a fish that can live over 100 years,
Cool.
a Native American tribal chief who was murdered by another tribal chief, and at the heart of it all, the assassination of President James Garfield.
That's incredible. When you said when you told me we're doing Big Mouth episode and you're like, I'm finding all this stuff, I was like, well,
Yeah.
what's the phrase? Like, you haven't said the phrase yet. And I was like, oh, it's just Big Mouth. And you're
Yeah.
like, dude, you wouldn't believe it's got a lot of stuff. So I'm excited to hear it.
Very good. And something that I just put together today as I was finalizing my notes, I will demonstrate that the commonly held date of its first use in writing is incorrect. I will supply the correct source and correct date.
Ooh, now this is pretty cool because we don't fancy ourselves like, professional lexicographers or
No.
But you did some digging here and you got some work done. So that's pretty cool. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. And anytime I get to wear the bandana and talk to a world record holder, our special guest, TikTok comedian Sam Ramsdell. And to be clear, I'm somebody that in past shows has probably not been very supportive of TikTok in my comments. Sam is awesome, and she's almost redeemed TikTok. Let's be honest. It's going to be tough to fully redeem TikTok, but she's done as much as one person can. Very funny, very entertaining, and looking forward to speaking with her soon.
And I will say that, like, I had heard of her and I don't have TikTok, and I've sort of, drawn the line or in the past of saying, oh, I've got everything else, but I got to stop with TikTok.
Yeah.
And then I've been hearing people who are like older than me and who are like, oh no, TikTok's pretty good. It depends. But she had made it onto my screen somehow. So she's doing stuff that's even beyond TikTok as far as how well known she is. Apparently.
Yeah.
I knew who she was.
Again, Guinness World Records knows about her. I wonder if her and Billy Mitchell hang out. Maybe that'll be a question that we'll ask her later.
Ooh, she could do like a live role playing of like Pac-Man. She's got that big mouth. He's the Pac-Man guy. I'm just saying, I'm spitballing. There's something there.
There's a marketing idea there. I like it. I like where you're going with that. So another place I like to go is Etym Online. So we go there for the etymology of big mouth. So it also provides the definition. So not a big surprise, person who talks too much. So one of the things that is interesting about this term is it's a term that's not a profanity, but it's a term that I know that when I use, if I'm calling somebody a big mouth, my wife pointed this out to me, that it's a pejorative, but it's like way up there. Like if I'm saying someone is a big mouth, I'm actually pretty steamed at them, that it's come through that I'm so angry I'm using the term steamed. That sort of thing. Maybe steam's another like keyword to show that I'm really truly angry. But when I talk big mouth as a person who talks too much, it's something that is a term I use that really expresses true and sincere anger.
And I can vouch for that because I've known you for a long time too. Some would say even longer than your wife. And I know that when you call someone a big mouth, there's so much more connotation that goes into that. Because it basically means like, this is a person who won't shut up and needs to shut up. And, all that feeling that you have goes into big mouth, where, that may not be a word that I would think of in that way, or I might use it more loosely, but I can vouch. I know that is not, no, that's not the only one, but that's the only
Yeah.
one that we'll talk about right now.
Especially on a PG-13 show. I think
Yeah,
that's a
because
good one to explore. There's some other words, and
yeah.
maybe they'll come up during 3 silly questions on for our Species supporters on Patreon.
Mm.
So the term big mouth, according to Enym Online, and I found this date in various places, 1889, and further defines its etymology as a type of fish and the name of a capable leader of the Oglala people in the 1860s.
So that was the chief. So the mouth is like a big mouth bass or something.
Very close. It's
Okay.
actually a fish called a big mouth buffalo.
Mm.
And the capable leader we're going to learn about, big
Was also
surprise,
named big mouth buffalo.
close, actually just
Oh,
big mouth.
okay.
So we're going to learn some interesting names, and I hope any rappers who have Lil in their name are listening to this, because you're going to have some good ideas for new names to put Lil in front of as we continue. So first, the big mouth buffalo. So when I heard of a big mouth buffalo, I assumed it was a type of buffalo, especially
Mhm.
if there's a Native American tribal chief with the same name.
Right.
But it's actually a fish with a large mouth. Big surprise. So according to Wikipedia, the big mouth buffalo is a fish native to North America that is vulnerable and in decline. It is the largest North American species in the sucker family and is one of the longest lived and latest maturing freshwater fishes, capable of living beyond 110 years.
Wow. That's why we were just talking. I was talking to some people the other night about how some animals live so long and you're like
Mhm.
a little too long, like
Yeah,
turtles. It's like, I wouldn't mind getting a turtle, but you've got to like bequeath the turtle in your will and stuff because that thing's going to outlive you. Sounds like the big mouth
yeah.
buffalo was like that.
But it's pretty impressive for a fish, because you see a
Yeah.
turtle and it's got a giant shell, and you've seen those old turtles too, that you almost feel sorry for them. You
Yeah.
almost wish like
Oh yeah.
someone would take them out and put them out of their misery. But to be a fish, I don't know how that works to be a fish, and you can't get slower as a fish, and maybe that's how they expire. In year 111, they start to slow down a little bit too much.
Right. They finally get it.
Yeah. So the big mouth's native distributions confined to the countries of Canada and the United States, native to the Red River north of the North and Mississippi River drainage basins, and basically inhabits a lot of areas, including North Dakota and Montana, where a lot of Native American tribes were. So I haven't found a definitive link between the big mouth buffalo and the Native American tribal chief big mouth that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But I'm assuming that it was pretty much related. Once you would think hearing a fish to be, if he was named after like a big mouth bass, that's not really impressive.
Yeah.
But when you see a fish that lives as long as the big mouth buffalo, and it's also a pretty large fish, you
Mm.
see it. It's not hiding from anybody
Right.
to add to its longevity. It's pretty impressive.
Well, I'm also just impressed about the amount of ocean life there is, that
Mhm.
that I've never heard of this one, and there's so many like things under the sea. And that's my thing is I think it's Neil deGrasse Tyson or one of these people that
Mhm.
says, space is cool, but like we got a lot of stuff in
Oh
the
yeah,
ocean we haven't found yet. So that's one more now that I can say I know, and there's like a million other ones, but
yeah.
the big mouth buffalo.
Big
Cool.
mouth buffalo. So we're learning some things. So speaking of big
Yeah.
mouth, let's talk about big mouth, the Native American chief. And by the way, I keep having some sort of like problematic like trigger go in my head. So if I
Yeah.
hesitate every time, I'm making sure that I don't say anything incorrect. So that is the awkward pause before Native American. So anyway, we denounce racism on this show. And also too, I think Belgian Mongolians are pretty close to relatives of Native Americans. So I think I get a little bit of leeway there, a little bit of a race card I can put down
Yeah.
if necessary. And if you disagree, go attack us on Twitter at Speaksies and also at Speaksies on Instagram. So pivoting, Big Mouth was an Oglala leader of the Brule Lakota tribe. He was one of the signers of the Second Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868 and remained a bitter opponent of further American settlement. He had conflict often with another leader by the name of Spotted Tail.
Mm.
And again, rappers, if you're listening, this is when you need to kind of turn your ears up here. You're going to hear some cool names. Big Mouth was the first son of Old Chief Smoke. That was his father. And his mother was Old Chief Smoke's third wife, Burnt Her Woman.
I shouldn't laugh. It's majestic and everything. It's cool.
It's
Just
an
burnt.
interesting name.
When you, I
Burnt
don't know
Her
why.
Woman.
When you, you know what? I'm gonna stay away from jokes with
Yeah.
this. I was thinking about something, but let's just keep rolling. It's not worth it.
Probably not, but I'm
Burnt
here
Her
to
Woman.
support.
Well, it probably wouldn't have been funny. If I thought it was funny, I would have said it. But
It's all right. Hey, that's how I roll. Also, if you're wondering, like if Big Mouth had like a brother named Brad or Terry or something like that, he had a twin brother by the name of Blue Horse.
I'm sorry, that's a cooler name, Blue Horse. I'd be jealous. No, wait, but you don't? I don't know if you know this or not. Do they have to like earn their name like somehow, or is it just you're born and all of a sudden you're Blue Horse? Do you know? I don't expect you to be an expert on this, but
I'm not sure. I'm sure there's other things that are earned, but I'm also feeling that problematic voice in the back of my head going that we're going to wander into something that could get us in trouble.
Yeah.
Speaking of wandering into trouble, as I mentioned, Big Mouth was very critical of Spotted Tail and the policy that he followed negotiating with the United States with Washington, D.C. Became pretty contentious to the point that one time in 1869, Spotted Tail called at the door of Big Mouth's lodge and asked to speak with him. When Big Mouth appeared, he was seized by two warriors, while Spotted Tail drew a pistol and shot him.
Dang, they did Big Mouth like that?
They did Big Mouth like that. And what's interesting about this is this wasn't one of those Biggie Tupac who shot them things.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that Spotted Tail shot him, including his brother Blue Horse.
But going back to the fact that you said you use Big Mouth as one of your sort of break in the case of emergency. I really don't like this person.
Yeah.
The guy, I mean, who knows though? Like we've said, we don't know how how Native Americans got their names. He could have just been Mouth at some point, or he could have just been like appropriate Mouth. And at some point he started pissing people off and he became Big Mouth. So that the fact that he was able to be shot, and he may have been a great person, but the fact that he got shot by
Spotted Tail
and like everyone knew it, and everybody was like, he was a Big Mouth anyway. Sounds like he may, I'm not saying he deserved it. I'm just saying the fact that his name is Big Mouth.
Yeah. When somebody named Big Mouth gets killed, you wouldn't be surprised of like, well, that sounds like somebody who didn't know when to shut up.
Exactly
My
point.
And actually, maybe it's true because he was very critical of Spotted Tail's leadership. And again, it was known that Spotted Tail committed this act, and there really was nothing that happened to him. Blue Horse was not happy with that, but there was some sort of compensation was negotiated between him and Spotted Tail, and there was no more violence after that. Blue Horse chose not to avenge the murder, and chose a path of nonviolence, and actually moved his band out to another locality.
I think Blue Horse knew. I think Blue Horse was like, look, he's my brother.
Yeah. But he doesn't know when to shut up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll move along. We'll take whatever settlement that we make here and move along.
Yeah. So Big Mouth is not the key to this term being used, but I think it helped because it was a well-known story and his name was well-known. And I think it helped to promote the term getting into the lexicon in the next few years. But before I get into the real reason that it's in our lexicon, the assassination of President Garfield, which along with that, I have discovered the true date of this origin. Scott, you have a Big Mouth that you wanted to talk about.
I was thinking about this today because we were going to do this, and I'm going to try to wedge this thing that I learned today online. So that I learned today and somehow get it into the episode, which is a guy that I always liked, and he had no problem giving his opinion, and I don't think a lot of people probably didn't like him,
Yeah.
was Roger Ebert, the film critic.
Yeah.
Um, and I always liked Roger Ebert. I used to watch
Mhm.
At the Movies, and I was listening to, I think that's what it was called, right? At the Movies with
Yeah.
Siskel and Ebert. Okay, and you grew up with them too,
Oh,
right?
yeah. They were, staples in our home.
Yeah, and really, not to get off too much of a tangent with these guys, but boy, they were really trailblazers. I mean, if you look at a lot of what's going with the, even just like the YouTube shows and the movie critics that
Mhm.
are out there now, I mean, it really, I mean, obviously there were other ones, but okay. So I'm listening to this podcast that
Mhm.
is, I think it's called the Big Picture Podcast, and they're doing a
Okay.
series called um Roger and Gene. And it's basically the story of how they met, sort of the complicated lives they had, and their relationship being complicated.
Mhm.
And they keep going to, and I accidentally started on like the fourth episode. I don't know if you've ever done that, but I thought it was just a
Oh,
one
yeah.
episode thing. And they keep going, and they're like, and now here's Chaz Ebert. And I'm like, Chaz Ebert? I don't know who that is. And
Chaz
it's
Ebert.
clearly a woman of color. Like
Okay.
I mean, it could have been Rachel Dolezal, but the way she was speaking, I was like, I think,
Yeah.
and I'm like, who is this person and what's the relationship to Roger Ebert? So I Google, and I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but
Mhm.
Roger Ebert was married for like 30 years to a black woman. So,
Mhm.
and the fact that Roger Ebert, and the reason it's kind of a big deal that I didn't know that sort of is like, I think you'd be hard to pressed to find a more white person
Yeah.
than Roger Ebert. And the fact that he's got this, beautiful woman of color that he was married to for
Mhm.
20 years, I feel like, I don't know. I'm not saying racism should have be solved at this point, but
Yeah.
that didn't get played up enough. I mean, did you know that?
Now that you say it, I think I did,
Okay.
but I tell you what I didn't know was her name was Chaz.
And
That to me is actually more surprising.
that played into it for sure. And that because
Mhm.
my confusion was with, you're thinking Chaz Bono or
Yeah.
Chaz. Chaz is a name that of mystery. Chaz is a name. Yes, you can be named Chaz, but you're generally, it may be a name you choose as you're going through some change in life, or it could be a shortening of something else, I guess. Um, so Chaz Bono, beautiful black woman, widow of Roger Ebert. I learned that today, and I thought I would share it. All right, but moving on from Chaz, there was one other thing I wanted to
Mhm.
bring up, if that's okay. So you may notice that if you're watching this on YouTube, which hopefully you are, you'll see that where my name is right here. Here, I do that. Boom. It says hashtag loquacious.
Mm.
Where that came from was I was in a class in high school, like an English honors class, and a lot of my best friends were in there. And we would have these quizzes, and they were vocabulary quizzes, and then our teacher would always try to stump us at the end with some word
Mm.
that she thought there's no way any of us would know. Like, for example, one
Mhm.
time she did the word taciturn,
Hmm.
and I was the only kid in the class. I knew what it meant. I put, reserved and quiet. And afterwards she goes, how did you know that? I'm just like, because I read books,
Yeah.
and there's Terry Brooks used to use that word in the Sword
Mhm.
of Shannara. And so, which made me really even more popular with the ladies at
Yeah.
that point when I broke that out. But so then one day the word was loquacious. Well,
Hmm.
again, I knew what it meant. And so so she's trying to help people out, the teacher, and she goes, because everyone's like, oh, I don't know what that means. And she looks around the room and she goes, there are a couple people in this room I would say that are loquacious. And she said, Jamie, this guy that I couldn't stand. And
Mhm.
then she said, Scott McGinnis.
Mhm.
And so I see who I think is one of my best friends, Sarah, who's now married to our
Oh, yeah.
good friend, Adam. And she goes, oh, okay. And then she writes down the description. And the teacher goes, okay, loquacious, what does it mean? And everybody starts yelling out these like insulting things. And she
Right.
says, obnoxious. And I'm like, I thought you were like my best friend. And as soon
Yeah.
as she said, it's like Scott McGinnis, you wrote down obnoxious. And so obnoxious to me has always had this terrible
Oh.
connotation. And I really remember like that. I was like really mad. And then later I was like, what the hell? She's like,
Yeah.
well, no, it was because of Jamie. And I was like, but you think I'm obnoxious? And she's like, well, no, not really. And I was like, oh, maybe I am obnoxious. So I've tried really hard to, like, that became a curse word for me that day.
Yeah.
And if I use that against somebody, it means I really don't like them. So that's my long-winded story about a word. And loquacious is another way to say you have a big mouth, basically,
Yeah.
which I do. So
No, it's okay. I don't blame you. I'm impressed at all the syllables that were used in both those words that I won't even try to repeat. Probably one of the reasons I have to stick with big mouth is, the syllable count is pretty low on that. So I'm impressed that you can be angry and use so many syllables at the same time. That's a good thing, a good habit to have. And I don't think you're obnoxious at all. And
thank you.
does this teacher still active at
Oh
that
yeah,
place?
she's
Okay,
there.
good. All right,
She
good. Well, we can
I've
do
got
some tormenting afterwards. We have resources there, so we can maybe accidentally put some things on social media at Speaksies at either Instagram or Twitter. Maybe get some vengeance for you. See who's obnoxious now.
I have dirt on her. I have good The older you get, the more vengeance you can take on people. And I've got some good stories that we got to keep off air about that teacher. But anyway,
I like that.
I'll tell you
Well,
later.
well, speaking of vengeance, let's get back to the story of Big
Yes.
Mouth and the assassination of President Garfield.
Yeah.
So James A. Garfield is the 20th president of the United States of America. He's always been somebody that's like a blind spot for me. I kind of know all the presidents at the beginning. I know like the last 100 years. I know around the Civil War, but then there's just some kind of blurry spots. And in my defense, one of the reasons I think President Garfield is a blind spot is he was president for 6 months, and I think
Really?
about 2.5 of those he was dying.
When you put it that way,
Yeah.
it's almost impressive that we know his name.
It is, but you're gonna know his name, and normally I don't like to, call attention to people that do bad deeds, but his assassin, Charles Guiteau, is has a very interesting life and is gonna put a little bit flavor in the story of Big Mouth. So, the background for the assassination of James Garfield, during this time, this is post-Civil War, so, the Republican Party is split into 2 factions, the stalwarts, who supported existing federal government patronage and were also supporting Ulysses S. Grant's pursuit of a third term,
Mm,
which was going to, at that time, break George Washington's. It wasn't a law, but it was, based on Washington's example, you only serve 2 terms in a row.
mhm.
And the other, so there's the stalwarts on one side, and on the other side, there's a group called the half-breeds who supported civil service reform. So James Garfield was a Republican, but he was neither one of these. But as the convention went on and the need for a compromise was made, a prominent stalwart by the name of Senator Roscoe Conkling of New York, through his support behind Garfield, essentially made him a half breed. And also to keep the other group happy, they placed Chester A. Arthur, a stalwart, on the ticket. And at this time, too, this was post-Civil War, so the Democrats basically would take every southern state. So it was very important for there to be unity in the North, that they wouldn't be divided,
Mhm.
and have Democrats take over if they compromised any northern states. So James Garfield became president. And here's where we enter Charles Guiteau. He was somebody that lived a very interesting life even before he assassinated the president. So I guess that's a little bit of flair in his life there, that, not only did he assassinate a president, but you'll see even if he had not done that, he would have been someone very interesting.
Mm,
So some highlights from the life of Charles Guiteau. He was an attorney, but not necessarily a successful one. Spent a lot of time kind of chasing jobs to be provided by government, not necessarily like civil service jobs, but more kind of spoilage jobs, both Democrat and Republican he chased. Prior to becoming a lawyer, he spent time with the Oneida community, a utopian religious
mm,
sect that was into group marriage, which I
mm.
have a feeling that, that wasn't the point, to get together and have everyone take turns doing the dishes, if you know what I mean.
I know
So,
what you mean. I catch your drift. Hey,
yeah.
real quick, you know who else was an attorney?
Who?
Chaz Ebert. But go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, Chaz Ebert. Maybe well, we'll see. I don't want to spoil anything. Maybe Chaz Ebert will come back up again. Not sure. So when Charles Guiteau finally settled down and got out of the whole group marriage thing, got married just to one woman, he was abusive to her.
Oh,
However, he kind of redeemed it. So she wanted a divorce. So to help, what he did is he had sex with a prostitute, and made sure that the prostitute, signed that they did have sex, so his wife would have grounds for divorce.
wow! Like best guy ever or worst guy ever? I
Yeah,
don't
well,
know.
he's like, honey, I want to leave you, but our current times, it's just not acceptable. He's like, I got an idea. So maybe he's
Right.
an ideas man too. Um, so as I mentioned, he spent some time as a Democrat, but during the time that Garfield was ascending, he became a Republican. And in his mind, and we're going to talk about the way Charles Guiteau's mind kind of functioned here in a little bit. He thought that he was key in getting Garfield elected. He was pursuing something called a consulship, which is a diplomatic post, not as high as a ambassador, but in that field
Mhm,
of things.
mhm.
So he uh, made demands. I believe he wanted to go to Vienna and some other places. And the way it worked back then, you wrote a lot of letters. You try to show up and get FaceTime with people. Like literally, you showed up where the president was and
Mhm.
waited in line.
Yeah.
So he never received that position and became a little bit bitter.
This is
So
like Banya wanting his lunch with Jerry. Just like kept showing up like I've earned this,
You
you
know
know.
what? I think that's actually a really good analogy.
Thank you.
So it turns out, though, we mentioned the Republican division that was there, that Charles Guiteau considered himself a stalwart. He was
Mm,
of the opposite division that President Garfield was associated with.
gotcha.
But he decided to make things right by putting a stalwart in office, by killing the president and therefore having Chester A.
Oh my
Arthur
gosh.
become president. So
Wow.
from Wikipedia, so you know it's good. Once Guiteau made that decision, he started trailing Garfield wherever he went. He was going to take him out at one spot, but decided to postpone his plan because Garfield's wife, Lucretia, was in poor health, and Guiteau didn't want to upset her. So again, a little bit of that, some sort of perverse gentleman streak in him.
Yeah.
However, it came to a time when he was alerted by the president's schedule, knew where Garfield was going to be on July 2nd of 1881. He was at a railway station. As Garfield entered the station to vacation with his wife, Guiteau stepped forward and shot Garfield twice from behind, the second shot piercing his spine, missing his spinal cord, but piercing one of his lumbar.
Oof.
And as he surrendered to authorities, Guiteau said, I am a stalwart of the stalwarts. Chester A. Arthur is president now.
Wow.
Yeah. So you would think that this would be the end of Charles Guiteau, other than that him being going to trial and being sentenced to death, which is
Right.
what happened. So I mentioned the year 1889.
Mhm.
So as I had found that on Enem Online, I did some research to figure out, was looking at the term big mouth in the year 1889. And I came across a resource, the Dictionary of Slang, Jargon, and Cant from the year 1889.
Mhm.
And when you look at the definition of big mouth that's in there, it's defined as American, a very common expression applied to any man who talks too much, who is windy, gassy, and given to bosh.
Give him to Bosch. I
Given
like
to
that.
Bosch. I like that. There's an album title on that somewhere.
Yeah.
They continue. During his trial for murder, the wretched Guiteau often interrupted the judge by crying out, "Shut up, big mouth." So this inspired me to see what could I find about
Mhm.
the trial of Charles Guiteau for the assassination of President Garfield. So by the way,
Mhm.
President Garfield was shot in July, didn't expire until September. Again, I feel kind of bad. The guy had a pretty interesting life up to being president, but as a president, can't really blame him too much for being shot. It's not really his fault.
Yeah, and it does it this guy Guiteau is nuts. I mean, he's a psycho. I mean, the thing he did with the divorce,
Yeah,
and then but he did put Chester Arthur in the seat of the presidency. I mean, that's
yeah.
kinda crazy. It's like a it it worked out. But then
And
he's calling the judge a big mouth, like, who
well,
does that?
yeah, well, we're about to see, yes, he assassinated president. I guess he's known for that, but we're about to find out his contribution to the English lexicon with big mouth.
Okay.
So, Scott, you know this, and longtime listeners know this. I love an extravagant book title. And it's
Yes.
been a long time since we've had a really long, extravagant, stretched out book title. It is the opposite of big mouth for me. When I see a long book
Mhm.
title, it's like watching a baby smile or a hippie get beat. It's just one of those things that just brings joy to my heart. So, the author of the book is H. Alexander.
Okay.
He was the official government stenographer and court reporter during the trial of Charles Guiteau. And the name of the book is The Life of Guiteau and the Official History of the Most Exciting Case on Record, being the trial of Guiteau for assassinating President Garfield.
Wow. That's yeah. He could have just gone with the life of Guiteau, but then you wouldn't know all that other stuff.
No, you
You
wouldn't
wouldn't
know
pick
all
up the
that other
book.
stuff. So I was very fortunate to find a copy of this. And by the way, this book was published in 1882. We'll come back to that in a moment.
Okay.
And was able to find a text version of this so I could scour for some quotes. So some quotes from the trial. The prisoner, Guiteau, in response to something the judge said, "It is of no consequence whether you do or not, Mr. Big Mouth Porter."
Wow. Wow.
Uh,
Well, go
oh, I'm
ahead.
not done.
Yeah.
Replying to something else that the judge said. "You are a big man this morning, Judge. You have a mouth like an old catfish."
I'm gonna use that. That's good.
And asked later, why do you call Porter a catfish mouth?
Hmm.
He said, "Why? It just popped into my head. That's the way all these things come to my head. They come on the spur of the moment." Um,
Wow.
oh, and I'm not done. Um, One time he interrupted the judge by saying, "How do you know, you great big mouth, you?" And finally, and again, this is all from the court transcripts.
Yeah.
Um, Again, I believe replying to the judge, "We have not come to that point yet. It's not likely we shall. You have more than enough mouth for a whole family, Mr. Big Mouth Porter."
Oh, that's good.
So I
That's
think
good.
hopefully I don't share too much in common with Charles Guiteau, other than using the term big mouth like a sword. So even though the Dictionary of Jargon, Slang, and Cant says that Guiteau said, "Shut up, big mouth."
Mhm.
That's more of a paraphrase, but he did call the judge, which probably, I'm not an attorney, probably not good to call the judge big mouth that
Right.
is in charge of your murder trial.
Also,
Um,
people named Porter.
yeah.
I've never known we had a like a football coach, health teacher named Mr. Porter in high school. I don't know why I
Mhm.
keep going back to my high school teachers,
Yeah.
who was like the most ripped dude I've ever known. Every person I've known with the last name Porter could kick your ass. I can't think of
Mm.
like an out of shape fat. So a judge named Porter in 1889 or whenever the
Yeah.
actual trial was, this guy was he wanted to die.
Yeah. And he did. So, what happened to Charles Guiteau? So, he was hung on June 30th,
Mhm.
1882. Um, he remains the presidential assassin to survive his victim longest by far. So, good for him, I
Yeah.
guess. While being led to his execution, Guiteau was said to continue to smile and wave at spectators. He danced his way to the gallows and shook hands with his executioner. On the scaffold, he recited a poem, "I'm going to the Lordy." He had written that during his incarceration, which I have not looked up a copy of that yet, because I don't know how much I want to get into the poetry of Charles
Right.
Guiteau.
Right.
But who knows? Maybe the word big mouth was used a lot. Also noted upon his autopsy, so he was hung,
Yeah.
and upon his autopsy, it was discovered that Guiteau had a condition known as phimosis, an inability to retract the foreskin.
Oh, well, that
So,
explains a lot.
well, it could, but what also is came out of his autopsy is belief that he had neurosyphilis. So
I literally
basically,
was about to say something syphilis has to be involved here.
yeah, and based on his time in a group marriage, his
Mhm.
very valiant going to a prostitute so his wife could divorce him, and other sort of actions, maybe taunting the judge during his murder trial, I
Yeah.
would say that the guy, I, I think speculating that something was wrong with his brain
Yeah.
is not really too much speculation.
Yeah. No. By the way, this has been fascinating. Props to you for going this deep into this because I feel like I've learned a lot here. These are some of my favorite episodes is when you get into the history and actually like I feel like I've really like learned something here.
Yeah.
Um Guiteau, I'd never heard his name, but he is fascinating. And he was definitely sounded like legitimately, had some brain damage or
Yeah.
something, which
He
is
he was
is a shame, but
yeah, especially I believe, President
for
Garfield would agree with you too.
yeah.
So another thing that's exciting about this is, the book that we read is or that I was quoting from is from
Mhm.
1882. So while the date of 1889, and they're doing some additional research, it is actually the 1889 and Adam Online is actually referring to the publication in the Dictionary of
Mhm.
Slang, Jargon, and Cant in 1889.
Mhm.
But I would say that the first actual use of this comes from the trial of Charles Guiteau.
Nice job. I think you may have just done something there. That's
Yeah,
great. That's
maybe
awesome.
put me in the record books.
You
And
should be because he definitely said good big mouth a whole heck of a lot
yeah.
of times.
So again, to summarize, big mouth used as a pejorative of someone who talks too much. It kind of builds from a fish called the big mouth buffalo. Maybe the term was popularized by a Native American tribal chief named Big Mouth who was killed, but definitely got into the lexicon by Charles Guiteau, stalwart of stalwarts, assassin of James Garfield, and a guy who probably had syphilis. So with that, it's now time to speak to our special guest, Sam Ramsdell, TikTok comedian, right after this. Our guest is a social media sensation with over 2 million followers alone on TikTok, where you can find her videos, many with a mouth theme. This is fitting as she holds the Guinness World Record for largest mouth or mouth gape. But our guest is not a novelty act. She's a singer, creator, and comedian, and is doing her share to make America gape again. Sam Ramsdell, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I love hearing it. Make America Gape again.
So is that I know that was a shirt being posited. Is that going to happen?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
obviously with the title of largest mouth gape, which thank God
Yes.
just to note, it used to just be largest gape in the world. So
Yeah. And that could be
thankfully
misconstrued in any weird ways at all.
yeah. So I was like, thank you for adding mouth. I still don't understand why they need to put the word gape in it, but it is funny. I mean, it's natural, it's comedic in itself. So I kind of, it kind of works. But yes, I talk a lot about gapes
Mhm.
in my comedy, obviously big, very passionate about
Yeah.
gape health. So
So tell us a little bit, how did your journey on TikTok begin?
yeah, so I live outside New York City, and
Mhm.
pre-COVID, I was going into the city 5 nights a week. I was trying to be a comedian and a singer. I
Mhm.
actually started growing up as a singer
Mhm.
and loved doing comedy too. So I was trying to find a way to kind of balance both. And I was writing comedic songs, going to the city, doing, as many shows as I could. And then of course, once, the pandemic started, it was like, all right, how am I gonna be creative? How am I gonna find a new
Mhm.
outlet to be able to, perform and do what I love in a different way? And of course, TikTok was starting to blow up.
Yeah.
So started the pandemic, logged on for the first time, and
Mhm.
it was like an April time frame. And of course, I've always known I have a big mouth, but like everything's so niche on TikTok. If it's,
Right.
if you're a TikToker and on there pretty often, there's obviously now millions of creators on there. It's like,
Mhm.
what was my thing that was different? And it was my mouth. And slowly found out that was like, what was going to get me to the top, truly.
So when was there a moment when you realized that something special was happening with what you were doing on TikTok?
Yeah, well, one of the first videos that went super viral
Mhm.
was, one of my biggest ones at the time. It was like a million views, but for me, that was huge. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm on to something. But it was when, there's a filter where it makes your mouth really big.
Mhm.
And I did the trend without using the filter and was like, hashtag no filter because
Mhm.
I already have a gigantic gaping hole in
Mhm.
my face. And it took off, and I got so many questions. Like, it was something that constantly came up on the comments of my videos, even when I wouldn't try to like quote unquote show off my mouth,
Right.
I would have constant, it was like, I'm not even trying to like do anything crazy. It's just constantly people are like, what is up with your mouth? Like, what's going on here? So that's when I knew.
You knew something was going on there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you decided to go for the world record, was there just a moment like you woke up one day and it's time to do this? Tell us, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I owe it all to I joke to the children of TikTok. They really, I always knew I had a big mouth, but first of all, I didn't even know that there was a world record for biggest mouth.
Right.
And then I didn't know what the requirements were really. And again, time and time again, I get comments, you got to go for the world's largest mouth. You got to go for the record for the world's largest mouth. And they would comment and, on one of my videos, they were like, do the measurements. Here are the current measurements for the world's largest mouth. You got to measure and see, how close you are.
Right.
So I did a TikTok measuring my mouth and I like beat it. And I was like, wait. So I actually did the TikTok of me and like, wait a second, like, do I have the world's largest mouth? And Guinness World Records is huge on social media. Like, I follow them. They have a ton of followers too on TikTok. And they saw my TikTok and they emailed me and they were like, hey, we saw your TikTok. Here are all the requirements, and it's like, this was back in January of 2021. So it took months really of back and forth and all this different special, details that they need, requirements, all this crazy stuff. Yeah. So it was a long time, but crazy.
Here we are. And actually, and this is true. I am a fellow world record holder, nowhere near as an individual accomplishment. I attended the largest American football game.
Wow.
In 2016, it was 156,000 people and then some. And I think that's the same amount of Coors Lights I had that day too. That's not in the record books. So I feel like I can, an individual achievement is much more impressive. And Scott, unfortunately, couldn't be here tonight. He is working on an individual record for most circumcisions actually received. He's not a doctor.
Yeah, he's just doing it himself.
He just has foreskin for days. So it's unfortunate he couldn't be here tonight, but you helped inspire him too. Yeah, so you're just inspiring people everywhere. So as a real world record holder, not just somebody who slept through a football game, are there any perks? Like, what are some things you get as a world record holder?
So, the biggest thing was obviously, just the title of it and getting the recognition, then obviously the press that came with it. I got to be, like CNN was at my house, Inside Edition, like these crazy news sources that were reaching out to me. So that you don't get paid. It's not, you don't get any monetary compensation for it. Obviously you get the plaque, you get to be in the book.
Okay.
And unfortunately, because technically I got the official title was like July 30th, 2021. And the cutoff was like July 1 to get into the book. So, but I'll be in 2022, hopefully.
Awesome.
If, takes it from me, takes my title, but haven't seen any competitors yet. So good.
And we'll help organize a mob to take them down. We'll utilize social media we protect our own. Yes. So we're going to help you keep that record in any way that we can.
Thank God.
As legally as possible. So one of my favorite segments that you do is you go to different restaurants and you try different food and see generally how much you can get in one bite. So do you have like a bucket list or a dream list of restaurants or things to try?
Well, I get people that send me recommendations all the time. And, with COVID, it's been difficult to travel anywhere. And obviously with, a full-time job that, it was hard to like travel. But there's places in Las Vegas, like there's like, the world's biggest pizza. I'd love to go to Chicago, do like a humongous, huge pizza that they do. I'd love to go to like all the different cities, like Kansas City. I always get like, these insane other barbecue type, sandwiches. Like go, I have lists. Hundreds of places that people have sent me. And even internationally, like go to Italy, have like a real, like, like, and see what that's all about.
And maybe you could team up like with one of the news organizations that interviewed you, like Inside Edition. You could go to, you could go solve a murder and have a pizza in Rome. There could be something like that. I'm an ideas guy.
Exactly.
So we want to help you do that.
Yes, I love it.
Sam, one of the things I really like about what you do is you're very positive on social media, great attitude and very positive content. And I know you mentioned the kids at TikTok being nice. Social media seems to bring out the worst in people. How have you responded to negativity? And do you have maybe advice for younger people on how to navigate social media and some of the bad tendencies that come with that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's obviously part of it is just part of the nature of social media. It's just
Right.
people, no matter who you are, what you do on social media, someone's gonna have something negative to say about it.
Mhm.
And, a lot of times I just have to remember and remind myself that like that person, whoever's commenting something or messaging it to me, has to be in a really rough place themselves in
Mhm.
order to send that. So I always, I remember like Gary V. I'm a huge follower of OG Gary V stuff.
Mhm.
He always used to say, like, bless them and move on. Like they're obviously like, they're in a worse place than you are if they have to go out of their way
Yeah.
to type and say something negative. So it's always like, I always like end up feeling bad. It's like, and obviously something is triggering, something in them that I'm doing. And I think, it's like, it bring out, some people who are, insecure. It's a tough time, especially in the world right now. I feel like
Mhm.
obviously there's a lot of negativity going on with, pandemic and then everything else. So I think just a lot of people are going through a little bit of a rough time and it's easy to take it out on other people on social media. But, just reminding myself, it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with what I'm doing. It has everything to do with them.
Oh, that's a great answer. I want to say something snarky, but I can't do that. That's a good response to that. Um, Now this is about as serious as we'll get with you today, but not too serious. So one of the things we talk about with all our guests is a belief that Scott and I have that, our country isn't as far apart politically or socially as the media and social media tries to make us to be. As someone who gets to travel around, but also meet different people, but also spend a lot of time on social media. What's your take on that idea?
Well, I try, as you can probably tell, like by the stuff that I'm posting on social media, I try and stay away from negativity, as far away from political, and trying to see if there's, I really try and make sure that I am not trying to do anything offensive to anyone. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously it can be a little difficult sometimes with comedy,
Right.
but the whole purpose of why I, do what I do is just to make others feel better and to make others feel less alone in the world. And it's like, if that's not what ends up happening for my videos, and I also like, I don't even really, first of all, I'm also ignorant about a lot of stuff when it comes to like political stuff that what I would say on social media,
Mhm.
or give my opinion on, it was like, I don't even know if I'd want to act like I'm
Right.
speaking, competently about it. So I try not to really honestly talk too much about it. And I know it's a
Mhm.
crazy world right now, but I hope to be that escape from that, not to be like, hey, let's talk about abortion rights.
Right.
It's like, I think everyone should do their own research. I feel like it's something
Yeah.
that we kept out of sometimes social media. It's like we shouldn't be going and seeing what our favorite influencers' political views are. It's like do
Right.
your own research and figure out what you think you value and what your beliefs are rather than your favorite influencer,
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate if you ever do change your mind on that. Being ignorant of political affairs has never stopped anyone from commenting on anything. So never let that hold you back. But I appreciate you
True.
saying that. I wish other people could take your advice on that.
Yeah.
So TikTok is huge. You're blowing up, world record. What's next for Sam Ramsdell?
So, well,
Mhm.
couple things on
Okay.
the goal list. I mean, big overarching goal would be, obviously I have a show that I'm working on now that I do a lot. I live outside New York City, so I'm
Mhm.
doing it a lot in Manhattan and kind of
Okay.
the outskirts of Manhattan area. I live in Stamford, so Fairfield County, doing my live show.
Okay.
And the idea would be obviously to do more of those, to grow, be able to travel around and do live shows all over.
Mhm.
And also working on doing a podcast at some
Excellent.
point. So I've been planning that, and then also possibly, doing more of the travel and eating, maybe now that I have more time, being able to do some longer videos, being able to do some more YouTube style videos, or, eventually maybe even like a TV show. I don't know, something
Why
crazy
not?
like that,
Go for it.
Dream
Yeah.
big.
Dream big. And I've seen clips of your live shows that it looks like it's a full-fledged multimedia experience.
It's everything. Well, that's, it's like, it's not, I do stand up too, but of course, I love singing and I love being able to write music and do that as well. So it's kind of like a whole experience. It's almost kind of like like a late night show in a way, where it's, or like a variety show where you get a little bit of the stand up, you do some original songs, we do a little improv in there, some interactive stuff with the audience, maybe do some mouth stuff at the end. So it's a whole thing.
Well, neat. Well, I'm looking forward to hear that, see that, and hopefully you make your way down south. We'll be here.
Yes.
We'll be here waiting for you.
Definitely.
So promote yourself. Where can people find you? Where do you want to send people to learn more about you and your adventures?
Yeah, so I would say follow. My biggest platforms are TikTok and Instagram, of course. So, and it's Sam Ramsdell 5. So Sam Ramsdell 5. On pretty much all platforms. And yeah, I obviously am very active on there, and I post a lot of my shows and places that I'm going for sandwich. I'd call it my Sandwich Saturdays. So follow along and follow me on those platforms. It'd be awesome.
Awesome. And anyone watching or listening, we will have links on our site and on our socials to Sam. So you'll be able to look her up nice and easy and follow and support her. Sam, and I like the fact that you're also going to do a podcast. So, you got another world record holder. And if Scott, once he's done icing himself down, he should be ready to record again, and maybe we can do that with you. So
awesome.
Sam Ramsdell, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
For our Species supporters, we're going to have another segment with Sam, 3 silly questions available exclusively, if I can say the word, on patreon.com/Species to see some more of Sam. And Sam, thank you again.
Thank you so much. It was awesome. I appreciate it.
All right, that was our interview with Sam Ramsdell. We want to thank her very much. Thank you for listening to Origin of Species and for watching it if you are watching on YouTube. If you're not, even if you enjoy listening to podcasts through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, take a minute if you would. And what you can do is you can go to species.com/listen, and you'll see a link to our YouTube. Go on there. Give us a follow. We'd really appreciate it because we're doing more and more video, as you can see. And I do think the show works pretty well with video. So, but if you are just an audio listener, we appreciate you as well. It really helps us if you give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you follow us on Spotify, and we have social media as somehow slips out every once in a while during the show. So at Species on Instagram and Twitter. Yes, we know that they're kind of evil, but not when you're following at Species, of course.
That's right.
So I think I've covered it. Steve, Bob, as always, is your uncle.
Watch out for bears, and kale is from the dump.
Species.